Sophia Reynolds stood on the rooftop in downtown Austin with a drink in her hand, watching the city lights flicker below like fallen stars, and she had no idea her life was about to change forever. The music thumped softly through the speakers, while friends laughed and clinked glasses around her, and she felt content, but not complete, like she was waiting for something she could not name. Then she saw him. Ethan Carter leaned against the railing near the edge, talking to their mutual friend Marcus, and when he turned and their eyes met across the crowd, something electric passed between them. He was tall, with dark hair that fell slightly over his forehead, and eyes that seemed to hold entire conversations without words. And when he smiled at her, Sophia felt her breath catch. Marcus waved her over, and she walked across the rooftop, trying to seem casual even though her heart hammered in her chest. "This is Ethan," Marcus said, grinning, "and this is Sophia, the girl I told you writes those amazing travel blogs." Ethan extended his hand, and when their fingers touched, Sophia felt warmth spread through her entire body. "I loved your piece about Big Bend," Ethan said, his voice deep and steady. "You read that?" Sophia asked, smiling. "Every word," he replied, and his eyes never left hers. They talked for hours that night, leaning close to hear each other over the music, and the party faded away until it felt like only the two of them existed. Ethan told her about growing up in a small town outside San Antonio, where everyone knew everyone and family Sunday dinners were sacred traditions. He spoke about his parents, who had been married 30 years, and his younger sister, Emily, who taught elementary school, and his dreams of building something lasting in life. Sophia shared her stories too, about her college years studying journalism, her failed attempt at living in New York, and how she had returned to Texas, realizing home was where she belonged. When the party ended, Ethan asked if he could walk her to her car. They stood in the parking garage under harsh fluorescent lights that should have killed the romance, but somehow did not. "Can I see you again?" he asked, and vulnerability flickered in his eyes. "Yes," Sophia said, "I would really like that." Their first official date was at a Tex-Mex place on South Congress, where they shared queso and talked until the waitress politely told them they were closing. Ethan was different from anyone Sophia had dated before. He was thoughtful and present, asking questions and actually listening to her answers, and when he looked at her, she felt like she mattered, like her words carried weight. On their third date, they hiked through the hill country, and at the top of the trail, they sat on a rocky outcrop overlooking miles of rolling green. "This is my favorite place," Ethan said, his hand finding hers. Sophia leaned her head on his shoulder, feeling more peaceful than she had in years. By the third month, they were inseparable. Ethan would surprise her with coffee at her apartment before work, and she would leave silly notes in his truck that made him laugh when he found them hours later. They danced in his living room to old country songs with only the glow of string lights, and in those moments, Sophia thought she had finally found it, real love, the kind that lasts. One evening, after 4 months together, Sophia arrived at Ethan's apartment with takeout and found candles lit on the coffee table, creating soft shadows on the walls. "You did all this?" she asked, smiling as she set down the bags. "I wanted tonight to feel special," he said, pulling her close and kissing her forehead. They ate dinner on the couch with their legs tangled together and talked about everything and nothing, the way couples do when they are still discovering each other. Ethan opened a bottle of red wine and poured 2 glasses, and as the night deepened, the conversation shifted. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said, his voice quiet but serious. "Of course," Sophia replied, feeling her stomach tighten slightly. Ethan hesitated, running his hand through his hair, the way he did when he was nervous. "I know we have not talked much about past relationships, but it matters to me," he began. "I was raised believing that intimacy is sacred, something you share with people who really matter, and I guess I want to understand where you stand on that." Sophia felt her heart race, and she took a sip of wine to steady herself. She had always believed in honesty in relationships, that secrets created distance, and she refused to start hiding things now. "I have had relationships before," she said carefully,
I mean, we're both adults, right? We have pasts. Ethan nodded, but his expression was unreadable. How many? He asked, and the question hung in the air between them, heavy and loaded. Sophia paused, wondering if she should soften the truth, but she pushed that thought away. If we're going to build something real, she thought, then we build it on honesty. Over the years, maybe 12 or 13, she said, keeping her voice steady. There were college boyfriends, a few flings when I was trying to figure out who I was, and one really bad breakup where I made some choices I'm not proud of, but they were all part of my journey, you know? The silence that felt endless. Ethan's face changed slowly, like clouds covering the sun, and he set down his wine glass with shaking hands. 12 or 13? He repeated, his voice barely above a whisper. Sophia felt panic rising in her chest. Ethan, it does not change who I am now, she said, reaching for his hand, but he pulled away. I need a minute, he said, standing up and walking to the window. He stood there with his back to her, his shoulders tense, and Sophia felt tears pricking her eyes. Please talk to me, she said, voice breaking. When he finally turned around, his eyes were filled with something she had never seen before. Disappointment, maybe? Or betrayal? I told you from the beginning what I wanted, he said. Someone whose past aligned with their future. Someone who valued intimacy the way I do, and I thought you were that person. I am that person, Sophia insisted, crying. Those were just experiences. They do not define me. But they do, Ethan said, running his hands over his face. I cannot stop picturing it, cannot stop thinking about all those other people, and I hate that I feel this way, but I can't help it.
The rest of that night was a blur of tears and desperate conversations that went nowhere. Sophia tried everything to make Ethan understand that her past was separate from what they had together, that she loved him more than anyone before. But Ethan kept shaking his head, saying he needed time to process, to think about whether he could move forward. When Sophia finally left his apartment at 2 a.m, she felt hollowed out, like something essential had been carved away. The next few days were torture. Ethan responded to her texts with short, distant replies that felt nothing like the man who had slow danced with her just weeks before. I just need space, he wrote when she asked to see him. Space became a week, then 2 weeks, and with each passing day, Sophia felt him slipping further away. She stopped eating properly, stopped writing her blog posts, and spent hours scrolling through photos of them together, wondering where it all went wrong. Her best friend Maya came over one evening and found her crying on the couch, surrounded by tissues. You have to stop torturing yourself, Maya said, sitting beside her and pulling her close. But I ruined everything, Sophia sobbed into her shoulder. I should have lied or been vague or sensed that he could not handle the truth. You were honest, Maya said firmly. That is not something to regret. And if he cannot accept your past, then maybe he is not the right person. But he felt like the right person, Sophia whispered. On day 17, Sophia decided she could not take the silence anymore. She drove to Ethan's apartment unannounced, her hands gripping the steering wheel so tight her knuckles turned white. She knocked on his door once, twice, 3 times, but no one answered, even though she could see his truck parked outside. Ethan, please, she called out, her voice shaking. Just talk to me. The door stayed closed. That night, she sent him a long message, pouring out everything she felt, telling him she was sorry for not being what he needed, but that she loved him completely and wanted to fight for them. The message showed delivered but never read. The next morning, she tried calling and heard the automated voice say the number was no longer in service. Her stomach dropped. She opened Instagram and searched for his profile, but it was gone. Facebook showed the same thing, no profile found.
He had blocked her on everything, erased her from her digital life like she had never existed. Sophia sat on her bedroom floor, staring at her phone, sobbing so hard she could barely breathe. How did honesty lead to this, she wondered? How did loving someone completely end with being completely erased? Weeks crawled by, and Sophia moved through life like a ghost, going to work, coming home, sleeping too much or not at all. She saw Ethan once from a distance at a coffee shop downtown, and her heart lurched in her chest. She almost walked over, almost called his name, but then she saw him laugh at something on his phone, looking relaxed and happy, like he had already moved on. Sophia turned and walked away, feeling the weight of her regret crushing her. At night, she replayed every moment of that conversation, wondering what she could have said differently. Maybe if she had downplayed the numbers, made it sound less significant, he would have stayed. Maybe if she had asked him first about his past, she could have gauged his reaction before revealing hers. The what-ifs consumed her, turning into a constant loop in her mind that gave her no peace.
3 months after Ethan blocked her, Sophia sat in a coffee shop trying to work on her blog when she overheard 2 women talking at the next table. "He just could not get past it," one woman said, stirring her latte. Like she was honest with him and he made her feel like trash for having a life before him. The other woman nodded and replied, "Some men want a partner, but really they want a fantasy, someone with no history, no complexity, just a blank slate they can project their ideals onto." Sophia felt those words sink deep into her chest, and for the first time since that night, she felt something shift inside her. She had spent months drowning in regret, believing she was the problem, that her honesty was the mistake. But suddenly, she wondered if maybe the real issue was not what she revealed, but how Ethan responded. That evening, she called Maya, and they met for dinner at their favorite Thai place. "I think I've been blaming myself for the wrong thing," Sophia said, picking at her pad thai. "Maybe the problem was not my past, but his inability to accept it." Maya reached across the table and squeezed her hand, smiling. "Finally," she said, "you're starting to see clearly." "But I still miss him," Sophia admitted, voice breaking. "I still love him, and that makes it so much harder." "Love does not disappear just because someone leaves," Maya said gently, "but you deserve someone who loves all of you, including your past, not despite it." Sophia nodded, feeling tears stream down her face, but this time they felt different, less like despair and more like release. Over the next few weeks, Sophia threw herself into healing. She started journaling every night, writing about her feelings, her regrets, and slowly her realizations. She wrote about how she had given Ethan power over her self-worth, how she had twisted herself into knots, trying to be what he wanted instead of standing firm in who she was. She joined a hiking group and made new friends who knew nothing about Ethan or her heartbreak, and in their company, she remembered how to laugh again. One Saturday morning, 5 months after the breakup, Sophia was at a farmer's market buying fresh flowers when she saw Emily, Ethan's younger sister. Their eyes met, and Emily's face registered surprise, then something like sympathy. "Sophia," she said, walking over hesitantly. "Hi, Emily," Sophia replied, her heart pounding. Emily looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot before speaking. "I know it's not my place, but I wanted you to know that Ethan has been miserable. He talks about you all the time, regrets how he handled things, but he's too proud or too scared to reach out." Sophia felt her chest tighten with a mixture of vindication and sadness. "He blocked me on everything," she said quietly, "so even if I wanted to reach out, I couldn't." Emily nodded, looking down at her hands. "He knows, and I think that's part of his regret. But he built this wall, and now he doesn't know how to climb over it." They stood in awkward silence before Emily spoke again. "For what it's worth, I think he made a huge mistake. You were good for him, better than he realized." "Thank you," Sophia said, smiling sadly. "That means a lot." That night, Sophia lay in bed thinking about what Emily had said, and she realized something profound. Even knowing Ethan regretted his choice,
Even knowing he missed her, she did not want him back. Not because she did not love him, but because she finally understood that love was not enough when it came with conditions and judgment. She had spent months believing she was the one who needed to change, to be better, to have a past worth accepting. But the truth was, Ethan needed to grow too. He needed to understand that real people come with histories, with mistakes, with moments they are not proud of, and that those things do not make them less worthy of love. Sophia got out of bed and opened her laptop. She started writing, not a blog post about travel, but something raw and honest about her experience. She wrote about the pain of being rejected for her truth, about the trap of trying to be perfect for someone else, about learning that honesty without acceptance is just exposure. She wrote about how she wished she had asked Ethan about his values around intimacy earlier, not to hide her truth, but to understand if they were compatible before her heart got involved. When she finished the post at 3 a.m, she sat back and read it through. Tears. But this time, the tears felt cleansing. She hit publish. Within days, the post went viral, with hundreds of women commenting, sharing their own stories of being judged for their pasts. Messages flooded in from people thanking her for putting words to their pain. One message stood out from a woman named Jennifer who wrote, "I stayed with a man who made me feel ashamed of my past for 5 years, and reading your story gave me the courage to leave. Thank you for your honesty." Sophia realized that her pain had purpose, that by sharing her story, she was helping others find their own strength. 2 months later, Sophia was at a bookstore, browsing the self-help section, when someone tapped her shoulder. She turned, and her breath caught. Ethan stood there, looking older somehow, with circles under his eyes and uncertainty written across his face. "Sophia," he said, his voice rough. "Hi," she replied, keeping her tone neutral, even as her heart raced. "I read your blog post," he said, "and I have been wanting to talk to you ever since. I unblocked your number, I wrote you emails I never sent, I needed to tell you I was wrong." Sophia crossed her arms, waiting. "I let my own insecurities and my rigid ideas about what a relationship should look like destroy the best thing in my life," he continued, voice breaking. "You were brave enough to be honest with me, and I punished you for it." "Yes, you did," Sophia said quietly. "I am so sorry," he said, tears in his eyes. "I have regretted it every single day." Sophia felt a wave of emotions, gratitude that he finally understood, sadness for what they lost, and surprisingly, peace. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "But Ethan, I have spent the last 7 months learning to forgive myself for having a past, and learning that I deserve someone who does not need time to accept me for who I am." "So what does that mean?" he asked, hope and fear mixing in his expression. "It means I appreciate your apology," Sophia said, smiling sadly. "But I have moved on, not to someone else, but to a better version of myself, and I cannot go backward." Ethan nodded, tears streaming down his face, and after a long moment he said, "I understand, and I hope whoever finds you next knows how lucky they are." They said goodbye in that bookstore aisle, and as Sophia walked away, she felt lighter than she had in months. She had learned that honesty without compatibility is painful, that values need to align before hearts get involved, and that sometimes the deepest love still isn't enough. Most importantly, she learned that her worth was never defined by someone else's ability to accept her truth, and that was the lesson that finally set her free.